for whom? Who are you creating this sense of place for? And that two-word question has stuck with me every single day since then. For whom? So we'll fast forward to 2020 when George Floyd was murdered. It was just recently, it was Memorial Day weekend. I fired up my laptop the very next day and drafted a very detailed email to our president and our CEO about what I thought our response should be as a company. How we should not let this moment or his death be in vain, but it should really transform what we do as a company. And I was pretty aggressive with what I thought I should do. And I did it for two reasons. One, I did it because I knew we needed to do something. Secondly, I had just joined the company in January. While I knew they had told me what their values were, I wanted to put these values to the test. So when you send a very assertive email like that, it's a way to test the values of the company. And if they said, you know what, Travis, settle down, we don't need to do that, then I would have known there might have been some misalignment. But within 5 minutes, I got an email back from both of them that said, we like what you're saying, but I actually think we could do more. And that's where I knew that I was with the right company. Because even as in my pain, in my anger, in my anguish, and I thought that we could do something, I knew that I joined a company that said, that's great, but we could always do a little bit more. And that's where we look at things like the Pearl. There's things that it can do. We're also very clear about the things that it can't do. And it can't erase a lot of the pains that have been caused in the history. But what we can do is try to make a new future, especially for the younger people in the neighborhoods and in the community, so that they see a bright future. So thanks for letting me share.
So to that point, talking about the future, another component of the future is to have a future that's more inclusive. And what we do is we build innovation districts all over the world, and all over the United States. Soon, hopefully, it'll be the world, all over the United States. And what we have found is in these innovation districts that it really is a chance to make sure that we have a greater level of inclusion. There's jobs. People frequently think that in innovation districts that there's jobs only for doctors and researchers. But the reality of it is that there are jobs for doctors and researchers. There's jobs for persons with college degrees. There's jobs for persons without college degrees. And there's jobs for persons who have certification. And a certification program can be a 6 months or 10-month certification program. And working within the innovation space creates an opportunity to be in an industry that pays about 15% greater than the general market from an employment perspective. So it really does create an opportunity for persons to get on a positive career track with a higher income opportunity. So that's the inclusion part when we're thinking about the innovation districts. And what I have on the screen here is just one for point orientation, give an update on where the site is, and then what we'll do today is we'll just go through the physical construction and give you all an update on where we are and what our timelines. So this image on the screen right now, this represents where the site is. It's a central location. Everyone knows where the site is, I believe, but I want to talk about why it's such a central location. It is right in between the uptown and the Atrium campus. It's right beside the 277. It has a rich historical history that allows us to build upon that and actually try to create this vibrant community, because it was vibrant once, and yet again create a more vibrant community versus what it has been recently. It's just been a one-story innovation, one-story industrial district. So let's start pushing our way through here. So our design principles, what we're really focused on when we design it. One is to maximize the access and the connectivity. I made the comment that how it's right in between the Uptown, Dilworth, Atrium, Cherry, and it's really an important piece to create that connection. Historically, it was a community there was a strong connection. Then it became industrial, that connection became compromised, and our strategy is to enhance that connection and make sure that it is now contiguous between all those communities. Also, creating an environment that, one, it encourages innovation, but it also encourages inclusion. And that's done in many ways. One is through the type of development that happens. There would be mixed-use developments. That means that there would be, of course, we all know there would be a 4-year medical school there, and that is a significant milestone. Charlotte has been looking for, from my understanding, for over 15 years to have a 4-year medical school here. And now that's going to happen. And why that's so important is there is a health disparity in our country. And what we have found is that if you're training doctors of diverse backgrounds, that is one of the strongest ways of closing that gap for health disparities. There is an initiative that this will be a very diverse medical school. So that's one aspect of why that's so important. Of course, it's important for Charlotte because it begins to identify talent that will come into the market and stay in the market. And what we would like to have is persons going to these medical schools providing service for the greater Charlotte market. So I talked about mixed use. That also means that there would be retail opportunities here. There'd be green space opportunities, as well as hospitality and residential opportunities. So the strategy is that you create a community that is porous, so everyone's participating in the community. And how we do that is we reach out to the community, and we've been having a lot of community meetings. We will continue to have those. But we're asking for input to understand how can this be authentic to the Charlotte market. So that's the mixed use component of creating an innovation district. The other piece of this is to really create this authentic place. What you'll find is that some persons approach development where they will take a project from one location and bring it to another location. The exact same project. Our approach here is that the project has to be reflective of the community. So we look for the community to help us design the project. We also look for the community to help us as we begin to program the project. And when I speak of programming, one of the components of this is that we would have debated green space, plazas. And when we have that, we have programmatic events in those areas. Those programmatic events could be movies, food trucks, speaking engagements. It'd be a litany of events that would happen there, and we want those events to actually attract the greater community. Actually, we were in a conversation recently with someone where they were talking about there's school reunions, and we were saying, there should be school reunions on the site just as well. So that's how we work to establish a place, and our strategy is to create these authentic places where everyone feels that they can participate, because one, they were part of the design process. Two, that we have programmatic things that are going to meet their needs. And then it becomes the destination that you want to be in. And then the last component here is to acknowledge that there's rich history here. So we've been working with a group in the community, working on what we're calling the Purposeful Walk. And the whole strategy around this is that when people come to the Pearl Innovation District, we're trying to embrace the history with Pearl. We're acknowledging the Pearl Street Park down the street. We're referring to the entire Innovation District that's Pearl. But we also want to be able to tell the story of the Pearl community. So we're working with a group where we are coming up with what we're calling the Purposeful Walk. And as you take that walk, we'll be able to get the history and the stories of the Brooklyn community. So another commitment for us is that we would have sustainable projects. What that means is they're green projects. So it's called LEED certification. That means that it's leadership in energy efficient design. So that what we're doing is we're trying to minimize the amount of water we're using. We're minimizing the electricity that we have to use for the site. We are making sure that we have multiple modes of transportation available to get to the site. We are encouraging people to bike. We're encouraging people to walk, but we're also encouraging the utilization of mass transportation to get to the site, shared carpools to get to the site. So to talk a little bit about the site. So the first piece of the site, the first phase that we're working on right now, this right here is a site plan. So what it represents is the educational building, which is called the Howard R. Levine Center for Education. It's a 14-story structure. That's where the medical school will be located. Adjacent to that building is the Research One building. That's a 10-story building. And if you'll notice from this image, in between those buildings, there's a plaza. And that is the urban plaza that we're designing, where we want to have programmatic events. We're still in the design stages of it, but this just begins to give you some understanding of orientation. You'll have a green component as well as a hardscape component that will allow us to have a variety of events. I mentioned food trucks, speaking engagements. We think that there easily could be class reunions here. There'd be dining, food and beverage, where you'd be able to dine in the plaza just as well. Adjacent to the development would be structured parking. So this drills a little bit into that plaza area because I think this is really a key part. What we envision is, when you travel and you go to different places, there's always some place in some city where people say, I have to go there. That's one place I have to be. Well, that's how we're trying to design this plaza. So this becomes one location where we have to go. And then when they arrive here, they're not going to just understand or experience the innovation aspects. They're also going to have the opportunity to learn the Brooklyn history because we're going to be integrating that into the purposeful. So the plaza is designed in 3 components. The central plaza area would be the lower level, and then there's vertical stairs that actually we're creating vertical gardens as you go up the stairs. So there'll be landing pads where you will be able to sit, rest, or dine. And then we have this upper tier where you have the exact same experience. In front of the plaza, one of the components I talked about how we wanted to weave together the community because it was an industrial area, and I think that from a traffic perspective, pedestrian traffic, vehicle traffic, it was really all destination driven. Well, we're integrating here a cycle track, and cycle track will connect to the city cycle track. So now you'll be able to weave in and connect to the master plan cycle track with the city going through our community. So talk a little bit about where we are schedule-wise. I'm sure many of you have driven past the site, but I'll send some images a little later here if we have not. So it's a big project, and it takes some time to bring it all to fruition. But where we are right now is we are working on what's called the core and shell. So it's really the skeleton of the building, and we're going to have the educational building and the research building. We'll have them topping out. That means we'll have all the floors in place, just the skeleton of it, by the end of this year. And then by the end of 24, what you will begin to see is the building envelope. And what that means is the exterior of the building, everything is coming together. So you'll be able to see, and I'll have some images here in a few moments, you'll be able to see how the building's going to look from the exterior. That's going to happen around the end of or the beginning of 24. Then ultimately, our strategy here is we're working so we can have everything in place for a summer of 25 open. So that means summer of 25, we're envisioning that we're going to have medical students at 4-year medical school. We're also going to have the research building open as well as the restaurants and the plaza. So when we come into a community, part of it is we're looking to make sure that we have, I talked about inclusion, I started with that. We're looking to make sure we have inclusion. It's a really big construction project. And thus far, we're pushing hard. I will tell you, we're pleased with where we are. I will tell you, we want to do even more. So on the educational building right now, we're at 22% from a MBE, WBE, SBE, so that's minority, women, and small business enterprises, and 21% for the research building. And we're probably about halfway through. So we still have room to get even more participation. And actually, we believe that we will get more participation because we'll begin to work with interior build-outs. And as we work with interior build-outs, begins to expand the pool of trades that we have. So let's talk a little bit about the site. So this image, like I said, I'm sure you all have seen it, but just brought a couple aerials to help you see it and get a point of orientation here. As you look at the site right now, the image there, the structure that you see, that is the educational building. And then on the other side, that is the beginning of the Research One building. This image right here reflects the Research One building. Behind that building, we see all those, you see all the stockpiling of product there. That's where the garage will be. And then right behind the garage, there's a new road that's being placed in that will connect to McDowell. This is another image showing the educational building. And I will say one thing about being in Charlotte, you can see it in this picture, there's a lot of cranes over Charlotte. Yes, it's a lot of cranes over Charlotte. But one of the other things I want to kind of identify in this picture is, if you look at that blue crane right there in the middle, that crane is the crane needed to build the educational building. Adjacent to that crane, there is a transmission line. That's a Duke transmission line. We are relocating that transmission line. So what that means is, instead of having those overhead transmission lines, all of that's going to be underground. So throughout the Pearl Innovation District, you see all of it being underground. Well, you won't see it. You won't see the transmission line because it will all be underground. So here's another image that gives you both buildings. So you're beginning to see a little more of the development. I don't necessarily want to highlight the transmission line, but that's our reality today. That will be down soon. But on the right side, the more vertical, that is the educational building. Then the lower structure right now, that is the R1 building. And in between that area, that will be the plaza, the images that I was showing you. And then we can take that from, this is what would happen if you go to the site and look at it, to this is what would happen, and this is what it's going to look like when it's done. So the more vertical structure is the educational building, and the R1 building is next to it. Here's some additional building images. I made a comment that you'll begin to see the envelope, meaning the skin of the building, coming together. And then this is at the ground level. You're beginning to see the plaza, the entry into the educational building and medical school. You're also, with this image, you're seeing the purposeful walk, the sidewalk. The whole strategy would be the sidewalk, and that sidewalk, purposeful walk, will intersect right with the plaza area. And with that, that's the conclusion of the update that I had on the development of the Pearl at this time. And we open it up for questions.
Okay. Thank you. That was awesome. The first person is Tommy, and then Keith and Laura.
Good morning, sir.
It's on.
Yeah, good morning. Good morning. Well, the question I have is that Cherry's the oldest Black community in Charlotte. Been here ever since the 1800s.
Mm-hmm.
Why are we the sacrificial lamb for everything in Charlotte? We had, what Black communities do we have now? What communities do we have now? We had Brooklyn, they took it. We had First Ward, they took it. Second Ward, they took it. Third Ward, they took it. Now it's Cherry. And I'm not blaming you for being an engineer, whatever you do. And I know they send Black people to tell other Black people stuff. So why do they have to use Cherry as the landmass to build all this, destroy another Black community when they have white communities surrounding the hospital?
So Just for a slight point of clarification, this development is not happening in the Cherry community. It is adjacent to the Cherry community. So we do believe that it will be beneficial because what will happen is there will be employment opportunities here, and those employment opportunities will be walking distance from the Cherry community. There will also be opportunities for food and beverage restaurants, as well as we talked about, there will be outside amenities that we believe the Cherry community will benefit from. So it's actually in the area that was identified as the Brooklyn community, and that's why we're working very closely with the community to make sure that we're going to be telling the history of Brooklyn. Prior to, well, that's why we want to tell the history though. But your point is that
They had Brooklyn, my point is,
We're gonna be respectful.
okay, I'm not gonna,
We're gonna be respectful in this building today.
all right.
so. The approach here is that we do not want the history to be lost. So therefore, when persons visit the community, they will know and be able to experience the Brooklyn history.
Yeah. Mr. Queen.
I ain't speaking out of my rear. I ain't speaking out of my rear end. It's been around a couple of days. Going back to the days of the Charlotte Business League and the MBE program and components, I've seen that where you have a 22% in one area, 21% in another area, and that's I think you call it MWB something. What does that stand for? Before I get to my question,
It's Minority Women and Small Business Enterprise.
Minority women, small business.
Yeah.
Okay. Because when this whole process started about MBE programming, we were talking about Black businesses in essence.
Mhm.
And since then, the MWBE has been thrown in, which we learned early on in this game that was basically white women fronting for majority companies. And we also learned that we now have another minority in the mix. So as we go down this path, my concern, I don't give a rip about what the other minorities are doing. What my primary concern would be about Black business enterprises and what the references are, because this simply suggests to me that we're going to just be pushed further back in the whole mix.
We actually have some information on
Yeah,
that.
sure. So I appreciate that question. So let me give you some additional breakdown on that. So additional breakdown.
Cutting in and
It's
out.
going now.
They're going in and out.
Additional breakdown on that. So the 22% of the 22%, the MBE, which is Minority Business Enterprise, that represents 20%. On the project where it was at 21%, the Minority Business Enterprise represents 19%. So our focus has actually been on American minority-owned businesses. Yes, I mean, we do include women-owned businesses and small business enterprises, but we really have been with a thrust of bringing African-American communities and African-American contractors to the project area.
Those numbers are skewed in there.
You're doing it. Still, we're gonna be respectful in
Okay,
here.
fine. Always this ass.
Go ahead. I want to come back to another. Okay, we have a listening audience, so we have questions that have texted us, and this is from Dr. Sylvia Biddle Patton. And one of her questions, she has several, is will you consider adding any more affordable housing units to your initial project plan so that those who work at the medical school can also live in the closest proximity of the medical school?
So the project area has a commitment for 5% affordable housing. So for the phase 1 development, and it is actually designed just for those reasons that she's identifying. And it's going to be, I know there had been some conversation at other community meetings about income discrimination associated with affordable housing. This is designed in such a way that a person comes with vouchers, that they're able to get one of the affordable units. There won't be any income discrimination for it. So that's the affordable housing initiative that we have for project.
Okay, Winston. Thank you.
Good morning. Good morning. Just again, given the history of the Brooklyn and Cherry community and Pearl Street Park itself that you discussed earlier, I wanted to know if there were intentional pipelines being created from either Wexford or I saw was it Whiting Turner and R.J. Leeper as I guess partners in this. But yeah, I wanted to know if there are any, whether it is from the programming opportunities or the career or job pipeline opportunities, are there direct pipelines to kind of remedy the communities that we were addressing earlier that were affected, mainly Black people?
Yeah, I'll answer that in two different ways. One, especially around the jobs and pipelines. So I think there we could look at the construction jobs, right? The jobs that exist right now and the subcontracting opportunities and that type of thing. Whiting Turner, our general contractor, participates in career fairs, job fairs. They have programs and events specifically to reach out to minority-owned businesses, women-owned businesses, and the like, so that they can become subcontractors on the project. And that's where we are achieving the success of hitting the 22%, 21% of having those dollars flowing directly into minority-owned businesses. On the longer-term permanent jobs, Dennis was mentioning in the very beginning that a number of the jobs don't require formal four-year degrees. In fact, when we look at similar districts that we've built around the country, anywhere between 25 and 40% of the jobs do not require a formal four-year degree. They can be secured through community college training, certificate programs, that type of thing. And so we are working with the local educational systems, whether it's the K through 12 system or the community college system, and also job training centers. So we start looking at those pipelines so more people can gain employment within the permanent jobs that will exist at the Pearl.
Oh, okay, my question, I did have a question. As with Brody in Greenbrook in East Carolina, they eventually added a dental school. Do you see that in the future?
Yeah, I can't say that I've had any discussions where that's been identified. I think the medical school is really going to be the thrust. And then the strategy is really to create research and innovation that has some synergy around health. So I can't tell you that there have been any discussions about a dental school.
Thank you, Gary.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Kuntz and Winston. They actually segued my question and asked part of it, but I do supply diversity. I mean, up until last year, I oversaw Bank of America's minority referral system and currently oversee Cushman and Wakefield's for B of A. Is there a way that you can enhance, well, not is there a way, is there willingness for you to enhance your diverse goal to a minimum of 30 to 35%, whereas currently at 22 and 21? The reason I asked, going back to Mr. Kuntz's point, because when I was running the Black Chamber, minority business meant Black business participation. Now it's the world of diverse. So WBE's MBE, and MBE isn't just Black business, it's Black and brown business, it's Asian-owned business, it's Indian-owned business, etc. Is there a way to raise that goal to 30 to 35% so that you are enhancing more of a mixture of diversity?
So our strategy is we have 20% as our goal. Our strategy is to exceed that, and we're doing everything we can to exceed that. What I would say is, if you have a way to help us, we'd love to have a conversation with you. And we've instructed our team that we're not just trying to get to 20, we're trying to exceed the 20. So afterwards we can have a conversation, and there's a way we can connect you with our team, and you can help us exceed the 20. We can get to 30. That'd be awesome. So we're not adverse to it. So love to talk to you afterwards.
This is my question. As a proud Brooklyn resident, many, many years ago. I have been a part of the Atrium and Wake Forest and Wexford Steering Committee for almost 2 years. And I've attended all the meetings of the steering committee. In addition, I have participated in video marketing efforts that you all have had. And I was with you all when you came to the Brooklyn Coalition meeting. This is a question that we have. We've heard what you said, but we have also seen what you have done that has not been consistent with what you said you would do. For example, in the groundbreaking ceremony, you had 200 people there, but less than 10% African Americans outside of politicians. There's been what we call, what we've been told, vetting of persons to be on your community advisory council. Going forward, what, if anything, will you do to change the perspective of this project to be more inclusive of African Americans on this committee, community advisory council, and also to look at expanding the number of seats on the council? We've been told that Brooklyn will have 1 seat on this council, and the council will be made up of various entities. So could you speak to what you're going to be doing going forward to make sure that Brooklyn's history is going to be respected and included?
Yeah, I'll take this one, and Dennis, feel free to jump in. For the community advice, a couple of things that I want to address. One, on the Community Advisory Council, we do understand, we've had some of these conversations previously, and we're glad it's been brought to our attention. We understand there's been some miscommunication about this idea of vetting candidates. The way that the Community Advisory Council works is that an organization will nominate or actually select who they want to represent them, and that representative sits on the council. There is not a secondary approval process. Whoever that organization selects has a seat on the council. Period, full stop. When it comes to Brooklyn, Reverend Janet, I just want to say, and you could correct me, Dennis and I want to come back and have that conversation because we do have a positive update. We want to share that update specifically with the Brooklyn Coalition out of respect to the fact that you called us in and asked us for these very specific things. We have positive direction on that you will be very pleased with, but I don't want to share that in this forum because I think it really does speak to the group that called us together to talk about that. Is that okay? Okay. Yeah.
Good morning, Dennis and Travis. My name is Mary Thompson, and members of the Brooklyn Coalition are with me this morning. And I want to kind of piggyback on what Reverend Mother was saying. And first of all, I want you to know we are Coalition is an organization of people who have loved, lived, and experienced and worked and raised families. We worshiped there, we played there, and was educated there. We know this is due to happen because, as the man said, we've been the sacrificial, and we know we're going to be there. So we know this is going to happen, but what we're asking today, and again, for 2 or more people on the Brooklyn Coalition to be seated on your Community Advisory Council board, because Brooklyn is the heart of the whole man. Who can tell the true history of Brooklyn and the components like the first one, second one, and third one, like the 2 schools, 250 businesses that were destroyed, 20 churches, a home? Who can better tell you except the one that loved and lived there about the history of Brooklyn?
So I'll respond to this one. One, we look forward to coming back to meet with the Brooklyn Coalition. The Brooklyn Coalition expressed this concern. So actually just this morning, we asked Reverend Janet to come back in June to speak to the group. So when we do, we'll have a more robust conversation about that. I do want to talk about, and it feels like because you initiated it, that group initiated it, so let us go back to that group and respond. But I do want to respond today to your comment about, the history. What we want is we want the Brooklyn community to tell their story. We want you to tell your history. So part of this purposeful law is just that, how to tell the history. And we're still in the early design stages of it. We haven't gotten to the point of we're addressing content yet. But when we get to the point where we're addressing content, we want actual persons from Brooklyn to give us content. So it's your words and your story. So that's our commitment, that it will be authentic because it's going to be coming from the Brooklyn community. And that's what we will come to the Brooklyn Coalition. The Brooklyn Coalition several weeks ago brought this concern up to us. And we will come back and speak to you all. And I think, Campbell, you'll be very pleased with our conversation.
Okay, yes. I just want to really, Dr. Janice, ask both of my questions. It's like she read my mind. On here. But I was wanting to ask you, are you really committed to the inclusion of the people and having a voice? And my other question was going to be, or comment was going to be about the groundbreaking that I attended. I mean, I was very, very disappointed. I'm not against white people. I'm not against anybody, but I only saw white, a little dribble of chocolate. And I felt like to really be committed to including, I wanted to buy out just so that somebody from Brooklyn could come. Now, I went to school in Brooklyn, but I didn't live in Brooklyn. And I felt like somebody from Brooklyn needed to have attended, but they weren't able to add anyone else to the list. But I just wanted to say that I was very disappointed with the groundbreaking, those the ones that were in attendance. And are you really, really committed to the inclusion of the people and having a voice?
The answer to the first question is yes. The answer to the second question about your disappointment in the groundbreaking, all we can say is that we will do better next time, and you hold us to that, right? I mean, I think we can't go back and fix what we've done, but we have heard, and we heard shortly after the groundbreaking, we've heard several times after the groundbreaking, we're hearing again today. We know that is important, and we know that it was that there was opportunity for it to be better. We will do it better in the future.
Yeah, good morning. My name is Jacqueline Stowe, and I'm a former Brooklyn historic Brooklyn resident. And I want to say thank y'all guys for having the nerve to come in here and take all these bullets. You know what? I just know that I feel in my heart that you're in the right direction. But at any rate, some of the comments are reflective of the community. Now, I lived in Brooklyn. I lived in the alley, Second Ward, My Street, and that sort of thing. Got bulldozed down, urban renewal, the whole 9 yards. And so the church, everything boomed on. And but my thing is reflective of the community. I like what y'all saying about bringing people who actually lived in Brooklyn to tell our story, So that's very, very necessary. The other point I want to bring up, the local education system. See, the local education system is all well and good. I applaud that. But we're Black people. We have children who attend historically Black colleges right here in North Carolina. I have grandchildren, 3 in college right now at the same time. A&T State University, my granddaughter just graduated. I have one at St. Aug, and I have one in Elizabeth City. Now, so you're saying local education system. So how are we to include former Brooklyn resident descendants, and so they can benefit from that too? I have a granddaughter also who just graduated A&T State this past December. Now, in talking about job opportunities, hey, what is it? Oh, okay, from Brooklyn, living in the alley, to A&T State University, how can she get a job? And this is all historical. How can she get a job working in this fancy facility that y'all putting up in here?
Once we know who the tenants are going to be, and one of the things that we think a lot about is about 18 months before the buildings are finished, we'll have a really good idea of who the tenants are going to be in the building and what types of jobs they're going to have. We've been having a lot of conversations with Johnson C. Smith, and they've been engaged as our local HBCU here. But we also want to reach out to, especially, I like this idea of reaching out to the descendants of Brooklyn residents and getting them more connected. One of the things that I noticed in a lot of cities, and Charlotte is like this as well, is there's this boomerang effect. It's this boomerang effect where people move away, but they want to come back to their hometown. And when they want to come back to their hometown, they want to reinforce the roots that were originally established there. And so anything we can do to do very specific outreach, not just to our surrounding HBCUs, but folks that have direct connections to Brooklyn, we'd love to do that as well.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, gentlemen, for coming. I just want to follow up on some things you said. It'll be in 30 seconds. I want to know about the 5% of affordable housing. What is the 5% number? Another on the coalition of persons. How many persons are on the coalition?
Sure.
And the last is, what will be your involvement in the 100th anniversary of Stan's Ward?
Those are three great questions.
36.
Okay, so the 5%. The 5%. So the 5% is designed that it would be half of that would go toward families with a 50% AMI or below, and half of it would go to 50% AMI and above. And it would be voucher based. So therefore, they could come with a voucher or they could come without a voucher, and they'd have the opportunity to get one of those affordable units in the community.
I meant total units, 5% of total units.
Sure. So it depends. Once we get to the point that we know how many residential units we're going to be building in the first phase. So right now, the only thing that we're working on is the R1 building and the educational building. At the point that we have a program for the residential building, I can give you a better response to that, but I don't have that program just yet. But the 5%, if it's 100 units or if it's 200, it's 5%. The second question was about the Brooklyn Coalition. So we were invited to the group, the Brooklyn Coalition. I am not in a position to talk about the membership. I don't know. There could be someone in this room that could speak to, the membership of the Brooklyn Coalition. However, I will say that when we went to that meeting, there were a lot of familiar faces. There were faces that we had seen at the Second Ward, that we'd seen at other Brooklyn meetings. So they have affiliation, and I'll defer to someone else if someone else wants to give an official response to the Brooklyn Coalition.
I think part of the question was, how many seats are there total? There are 11 seats on this. That's okay. No, there's 11 seats on this Community Advisory Council. There will be 6 community seats and 5 institutional seats. We set it up in a way that the community always has a stronger voting bloc than the institutions. Second Ward.
And the third question, Second Ward. So Centennial. I think it's 23, 100 years. So we recently expressed that we wanted to have support. There were a few things that we offered in the form of support. One is we want to extend monetary support, and we actually expressed that, so we're going to be extending monetary support for that event. 2, we talked about there will be additional celebrations that happen just as well, and we think that it would be worthwhile to have those celebrations taking place in the borough. So that was my reference earlier when I was talking about reunions. That's what I was referring to, that there'd be opportunities to do that also within the Rural Innovation District.
Thank you.
Okay, my question is, I've seen the Levine building, and you know who the Levines are, and I can't get the microphone to work, but I would like to know, we're talking about the research building, or this building, or that building, because of the history. Can you all consider naming some of these buildings after some of these people that have lived in those communities? I mean, we know what Levine is all about, but we don't have people that have what they have and have built what they have built. But the consideration of the naming of some of the people that have lived in these communities and made significant contributions to these communities have there been given any consideration of naming some of these buildings that you haven't named, a part of this host area? In consideration?
We will absolutely consider that. And what we will do is we'll continue to work with the community to come up with names and research those names, those individuals. I think that there's several naming opportunities that, can happen. I've been referring to the purposeful walk in a very generic manner. That is a real naming opportunity. Versus purposeful walk, it could be named after an individual. We've identified that, of course, there's going to be additional development opportunities here. We talked about there would be additional development opportunities here, so we will definitely consider that.
Next. Earlier when I walked in, I heard you alluding to the fact that you'll have it'll be open to the community in terms of utilizing the space for graduation parties, etc. Will there be a fee with that utilization, and if so, who will that fee be going to?
So we target, we set a threshold of donating at least $1 million a year worth of space in the form of zero fee type use of the space, $1 million a year. And we usually we prioritize neighborhood communities, neighborhood associated, neighborhood groups, nonprofits, and that type of thing. So that's a metric that we try to achieve and that we do achieve in each of our markets. If there is a fee that is generated, let's say Bank of America wants to hold their strategic planning event in our building, and they're not a tenant, they will pay a fee. Like they don't need a free space, right?
Well, we don't be a bank to do what I'm talking about. If I wanted to come,
no, right. I mean,
no,
but I'm saying like for those that are for-profit corporations that have the resources and they pay a fee, that fee just goes back into supporting all of the ongoing programming within the Pearl. But we do set a target of $1 million a year in space donated to neighborhood communities and groups.
I would like to make a statement before I ask the question. It ain't no Brooklyn. It's not a Brooklyn. Brooklyn is Marshall Park. Brooklyn is McDowell Street, but it ain't no Brooklyn. Question I have for you is that why did they decide to deal with it? Was the property cheap? Okay.
You okay? Yeah.
So I heard someone say, "Oh no." So what really happened was that area was thriving at one time, and then that area became an industrial community, one-story structures. It really became a hole in the donut in reference to connectivity. It's
So cheap.
No. So I mean, I'm not going to get into economics, but I mean, we all understand that things which are close to certain amenities will have, different valuations on it. So this site is clearly very convenient to Uptown. It was always, a very convenient site. But the site did not have an active, vibrant scenario as an industrial site. We are now going to be able to educate doctors on this site. There's comments about Brooklyn and education. Well, that's going to be something that can happen again on this site. Now, no disparaging comments about the industrial activities that took place on that site. Those were significant. But now we're going to have the chance to educate people on that site. And those people we educate, they're going to be able to provide medical services to people in the greater community. We think that is really worthwhile.
Good morning again. So I just want to know specifically, cut and dry, what opportunities, if any, are available right now where potentially Black contractors could be successful, could win those bids, and as well as just getting more specificity in that 20 to
40% to 40%.
Yeah.
You want to talk about?
And is that is it 20% or 22%?
No, I'll answer that part first, and then Dennis, if you can talk about maybe procurement opportunities and how they can engage with Whiting Turner and the general contractors. The 20 to 40% of, when we look at this as being finished, let's not think about the construction jobs right now. We'll get to that in a moment. But when the Pearl is finished and there are permanent jobs within the Pearl, within these shiny buildings, 20 to 40% of those jobs should be able to be attained without a formal 4-year degree. So those are lab technicians jobs. Those are bioscience technician jobs. Those might be entry-level marketing jobs. And when we look across the board, those jobs pay about 15% more than the general market rate of pay.
And I want to say, and also like the tone of conversations like this, there's a feeling that Black is a euphemism for poor or not as educated. What are those pipelines and even the higher level opportunities specifically for Black people, even with the school component? Are we making sure that Wake Forest institutes, I know Carolina had it a few years back and they took it away, at least at their dental school. But how are we making sure that Black people can be successful in being integrated into this project as a whole?
So one of the reasons why the medical school is so important in Charlotte is to train more Black doctors. Like that is so that we have more Black doctors that are providing services for the surrounding community, because we know lived experience is a key component to quality of experience and quality of patient care. And so that we're not affiliated with the medical school. I can't talk about their admission process or any targets that they have set up. But what we can say is the reason the medical school is here is because they want to train more Black doctors. I also know that when I say those 20 to 40% of the jobs can be secured without a 4-year degree, I'm not saying Black people can only get those jobs. What we have seen is and we see this in surrounding communities, that there are a number of Black engineers, there are a number of Black doctors that want to work, Black entrepreneurs that want to advance their enterprise and their career in spaces like this. And the more that happens, the more that young people can see that as pathways for them as well. And a lot of this has to do with both exposure and representation. When we look at when people walk into these buildings, do they see folks that look like them, that resemble them, that have a lived experience that they can relate to?
So the other question was about outreach. So there's going to be another outreach opportunity on site in July. So what I'd like to do is get your information, get this other gentleman's information. I'll connect you with our CMs, Whiting Turner and RJ Leeper, and we invite you to come out. And candidly, invite you to spread the word. So we've had a few, and we've had some pretty big turnouts, but we want to keep on spreading the word, get as many minorities to come out to participate. And afterwards, let's give me your contact information.
Ron Lee, you part of this? Okay.
Yes.
Okay, retired.
Ron Lee.
All right. Yeah, it's. Yes. That's the question that I think they want to ask about naming building after the people that have contributed to Brooklyn. For instance, Reginald Hawkins, if you don't mind looking up that name, Dr. Reginald.
Mm-hmm.
And the next question is, when will you be maybe committed to the community advisory council? You'll know that is what the community.
The target for actually seeding and initiating the Community Advisory Council is the end of summer. I believe it's around August is what we're setting up as our timeline for all the organizations that we're doing outreach to identify who's going to sit on the council for them, who's going to represent them, and we'll seat that council at the end of August.
Hi, Jessica Jarn. I'm the health reporter at QC in Metro. I have a really easy question. Are we going to be sharing this PowerPoint? Is it a possibility?
Sharing the PowerPoint?
I think it's already being shared because it's being streamed. Is that correct?
Yes, and if you send me the file, it will go on the forum website page.
Okay.
Slash.
Okay.
So you'll send the file.
Good morning. I was speaking to the two gentlemen up there. Did y'all speak back?
Yeah, good morning.
I have several questions just to follow up on what you said. First thing, when you talk about this advisory board, and I'm glad you're gonna have 6 on there from the community. My thing is, and this is something just for you to think about later, I don't want them to stay on there forever.
They're 2 to 3 year terms.
Okay. One question. Okay, the second is, where do you hold your outreach meetings?
We hold them in a variety of places, like here, we go where people want us to go. So I think there's 2 ways. Right now, we don't have a physical space, so we can't hold meetings in the Pearl because it's under construction. And so we generally will go where people ask us to go, and we will show up.
Okay, and the last question
Oh,
is.
one more. Dennis corrected me. But on the outreach meetings especially for procurement and construction, those are on site at the Whiting Turner offices. Thank you.
Okay, but I want community outreach meetings too.
Yes, we will go wherever anybody wants us to go.
Okay, and then the last question, we keep saying naming buildings after people. And I don't want to take away because that's very good. But what about naming rooms? And I don't, we tend to do the same people over and over again. They're grassroots individuals who are very deserving. So I want to make sure when you do your community outreach that we're inclusive of a process that will get those names involved and engaged. Because you named the floor after somebody.
So I'll speak to what we did. I mentioned that I live in St. Louis, Missouri, and in one of our project in St. Louis has a long history of blues music, and specifically a lot of women in blues music. And so all of our conference rooms, as an example, all of our conference rooms in our building in one of our buildings in Missouri in St. Louis are all named after historic blues musicians, women blues musicians from the St. Louis region. And so we do think that that's a very authentic, and it's better than saying it's conference room 1, conference room 2, and conference room 3, right? Or naming them after chemicals on the periodic table. Like to be able to name things after people that when you walk in there and say, you know what, I am in the, I can't remember any of the names that we can think of here in that conference room. Yeah.
And you can notice that individuals who are attending these outreaches,
Yes.
that.
Absolutely, yes, yeah. Yeah.
Did you have another question? No, okay, Danny, did you come up?
Okay, this is one that's been texted in, so we understand that you may have answered this, but we're gonna ask.
Sure.
We understand that you have hired a community engagement consultant for the project. What was your selection process? And was it open to the public? Or was the person selected without any public input and competition?
We don't have anybody on our team that's a community engagement consultant. I mean, I'm filling that role for Wexford, so I'm not familiar with what that question's referring to.
Maybe it's talking about you.
Could be.
Okay, Winston and then Gary.
Yes, can you just give us more description of Wexford's role in the entire process long term? Would they help, I guess, manage the entire facility, or is it just the construction in your hands off? What is Wexford's role long term?
Yeah, so we're the lead developer. So we build the building, we finance the buildings, we build the buildings, and then we have long-term asset management after that. So we're not going anywhere. We stick around in these buildings for quite a while. We also will start building. This is part of the process that we'd love to get some folks participating in. We're also going to be building a local team here. Right now, neither Dennis and I live here. We will be building a local team of probably upwards of maybe 4 to 5 people that are part of the Wexford staff that reside, live, and work in the area, and will be managing this project for us and running the project for us once it's finished. And this is only the first. Can I say this is only the first 2 buildings of multiple phases, right? So the expectation is there will be ongoing construction. When we look at what we've done in Philadelphia or St. Louis or even Winston-Salem, it starts with one building and then we stick around for 15, 20 years doing development.
Gentlemen, have you done any contact with the folks who are looking at Brooklyn Village? You've been waiting on them a while.
Yeah, so when we first arrived to Market One, that is a completely separate development.
I understand.
Yeah.
When we first arrived to the market, we did meet with them because we were being neighborly as we met with everyone to say this is what we're thinking about and how can we collaborate and work together. We provided our thoughts conceptually from a design perspective and provided our timelines. We had no additional communications with them. So that's it.
Okay, Gary.
You mentioned 11 members, 6 community, 5 organizational. Who are the 5 organizational groups and how were they selected?
So the 5 institutional seats would be Wexford would have a seat as the developer. Now I'm going off memory, so let me see if I can get these all right. So Wexford, Wake Forest Medical School, Atrium, the Pearl, which is the district itself, and then I'm at a loss for who the 5th one is.
That's okay.
Yeah, I can't remember who the 5th one is. It might be CMS actually. I think CMS. Yeah.
You said the Pearl.
The Pearl as a district is going to be an entity in and of itself. So there will be a seat there.
Okay. So the Wake Forest be 2.
Wake Forest Medical School just has 1 seat. Yeah.
Will they influence the Pearl?
Oh, wait a minute,
Mister, give me a chance.
What I want to ask from that community about the council boards, will they be paid board members?
They will not be compensated board members. They will not.
Question, you call it a Brooklyn Village? So when did the village come that in Brooklyn? It was never Brooklyn Village.
No.
It was always
No,
Brooklyn.
no, I'm talking about the folks from New York.
Peoples.
Peoples.
Yes.
Yeah.
You never heard of them.
No.
I'm not gonna go there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, Chris, good morning.
Good morning.
What percentage, Wexford are African American Black employees?
Chris, you wanna know how many, what percentage?
Let me see. I just ran these numbers. So we just added a few new people. I mean, to the team, we're hiring regularly. I'm trying to think what the percentage is. I think about 10% of our, 10 to 13% of our company are Black or African American. I know that 35% identify as a minority. Because we have folks internationally and that type of thing. But I think 10 to 13% are Black.
Okay, do we have any additional questions? That was the last question. If we had anything else, Carlinia?
Evidently, she's here, it's everywhere. It must be in her district. No, and she don't want everything's in my district. I know that, y'all. Okay, thank you. I appreciate all the help, y'all. But she's always everywhere. I would like to know, and Luana, thank you, and I'll later tell people why I'm thanking you. She's everywhere. Y'all vote for her. But I want to know from Luana, what do you think of this?
Oh, wow. Okay. Yeah. Thank you, Ms. Ira.
And I will call her at 7 o'clock.
Yes, you will.
Okay. Hey, everybody. I'm LaWanda. I serve you on City Council representing at large. A lot of this conversation happened really the couple of years that I wasn't on council between 2019 and coming back last year. So, honestly, for me, what I'm hearing, I appreciate. That 20%, yes, it's great that you're committing to 30. Look, on the city side, we're doing fine. I'm pushing it because on the state level, they're doing 30. Now that Sean has moved to become the director of Guilford County, she's killing it. So we can do better. To have those commitments are good, but I think you're hearing from the community
that was a misstep from the very beginning of who you had there. Take the time to hear and understand when you look around that room, who's your audience? Because you can't have the new people that's moved into the area and that helped to create that gentrification and displacement to then be the ones at the table to say how this is gonna look moving forward. So I appreciate the fact that you recognize that that was a misstep. Atrium did a misstep. For those of us that were in attendance at Atrium when they did the big groundbreaking, talking about diversity, you had a whole panel of all white men. We had a conversation about that as well immediately afterwards. But the biggest thing is as much transparency as possible and also consistency. Because here in local government, irregardless to how many melanated people we've had in elected office, government is the one who opened the door for these transitions to happen. But at the end of the day, who owns that land is who gets to sell that land.
Right.
So if we don't own the land, there's only so much we can ask for.
That's right.
We don't get to have a whole lot of demands, but we can make sure our voices are heard. So I feel like for this project, I'm excited to hear what's going to happen. Yes, if we had a conversation, because we have not had a chance to meet at this point. So this is my first time meeting the two of you and hearing this. I am going to tell you now, I'm going to push for more than 5%. But I also recognize that's the next phase because you don't even know what the total number of units are. But if you're thinking about the students working with Wake Forest, how many students are we anticipating? That should be a trigger to help you identify how many units you're going to need. And looking at those students that are going to be in debt for many years going through medical school, 5%, we're going to need to figure out how to do better if it's over 100 plus units. Does that?
But you got to admit those hard.
I'm not getting in trouble with me.
This is not the way we operate. We don't just yell out. We don't have a history of doing that. And we're not gonna do it today. But I don't know.
I said, I'm not getting in trouble.
Ask the question, is that what you want, Ms. Ivory? Let's let her know that's what you want to hear. Okay, I'm just saying that, but you just started talking out, and I'm just saying that we are gonna be respectful. It was okay to ask. That was not a simple statement that added to what she said. Come on. Really, Winston is, time is next.
Well, I'd like to make a comment first. All slaves had jobs. How long all slaves had jobs? How long they had to prosecute farms?
What was the question? I didn't hear that.
How long have project been planning?
How long you been planning? How long you been planning?
Sure. So the planning for it has probably been about 36 months, so about 3 years or so for the planning.
This is the last question.
This is my question. As you plan to bring people onto the Community Advisory Council, and those persons are coming, bringing their lived experiences and their intellectual properties, can you tell me why you are not considering having some type of stipend or some type of payment for them?
So the Community Advisory Council every year will have a pool of resources that they get to prioritize for ways to program and activate the pearl that meets the needs of their communities. If for some reason the Community Advisory Council wants to include compensation for themselves out of that, then the council could have that discussion. So there's a pool of resources every year during the life of the ground lease comes from the rent that we're paying or that's being paid. We're setting aside a pool of these resources, and the Community Advisory Council can prioritize how those dollars get spent. If they want to prioritize that they're compensated, that's a conversation for the council to have.
Okay. I want to thank Luana for her input, and I'm gonna close this out with my question. Okay. She made me think about you said 5%, and you're talking about the housing. I know when my daughter was at Brody School, so they have housing for their students. I mean, of course, they paid, but it was like apartments, whatever. So I was wondering, are you gonna be offering that, they would pay rent, but would you be offering that for your medical students? Because you're gonna have all these, I'm not sure how many students you're gonna start with, but they're gonna need housing.
Sure. So the thought is that because of proximity, that there would be medical students who would reside at the residential apartments and residential opportunities. It sounds like your daughter was in medical school or dental school.
She was in medical, yeah.
So they keep these very long hours, and having them in close proximity is truly a benefit. So in Philadelphia, we have a similar project, and there's also residential there. And when we did a profile of the population that lives in that the building, there was a large concentration of professional students, not undergraduate students. It's not that type of scenario, but professional students were there, as well as there was a large concentration of persons from the surrounding community and professors. So we're envisioning that it would be something very similar here.
Okay, well, I'm going to close this out. I want to thank all of you. I'm having trouble with my mic also. But let's give them a hand.